They're gonna know.
Yeah.
They're gonna know.
It could just be leaf. You know, normal.
That didn't take long to grow.
No.
Not at all.
A week and a half.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. This is our third ever broad question Q&A. Before we start though, I have something to open. I have been waiting probably 2 or 3 weeks. This has been on my desk. I actually entered a seed swap with the Celtic Roots Farm. Celtic or Celtic?
Depends on where you're from, I think.
Very barbaric way of opening this. Sorry guys. Oh wow, okay. I saw one that I'm really excited about. Oh, pink painted lady runner beans. Ooh, I'm guessing that's a pole bean variety. See, I wasn't gonna do pole beans this year, but people are making me do pole beans. This is from Tilted K Homestead. Slippery Silks bean. The slippery skinned Central American pink pole bean cooks remarkably quickly while retaining its firm texture and reheats well. Yep, they're making me do pole beans. Look at the color. I don't think we've ever grown a red pole bean. Or any bean. Any red bean.
No.
That's cool. Salt and pepper cucumber. It's another thing I really wasn't gonna grow this year, but I feel like I'm going to. I know we really like fresh eating with the cucumbers. I grew so many cucumbers the last few years that I'm kind of sick of them. I've made tons of pickles, but I think we're gonna grow some for fresh eating this year. Yarrow. Now I've heard of this. I think it's a flower. I could be wrong. Yarrow. If you know what this is, comment down below. I will figure it out eventually. Daikon radish. From Darlene. Snow peas. That's really fun. I don't know who some of these, like most of these are from. That's kind of fun. It's part of the mystery. Cumin. Look at that. I don't think we've ever grown cumin either. Cilantro, which is also coriander, yes, but cumin. Japanese wasabi radish. You like spicy things.
Yeah.
Would you like a spicy radish though?
Don't know yet.
We gotta put them in the ground soon. This is the one I was really excited about. It says loofah. It needs scarification. And if you don't know what scarification is, you basically will take a couple different grits of sandpaper and literally scrape the outsides of the seed. Some seeds need scarification for germination. I think the pink and blue butterfly peas are the same way as far as things that I've grown. But I'm excited about loofah.
That'll be cool.
Yeah, it's basically, it grows like a cucumber and then you're supposed to dry it out on the shelf and peel the outsides off. I think the hardest part is to make sure that they don't mold while they're drying out.
Especially here in our humidity.
I know. Anywho, now it's time for the questions. There are some real good ones in here.
I have some extra windows lying around. Would you suggest I build multiple cold frames or one greenhouse?
So this is coming from one of my friends who I know doesn't have experience with greenhouses or with cold frames. And so really, if you're just starting out, I would absolutely go with the smaller thing first. I suggested to my friend Erica to start with a cold frame first, get the hang of regulating the temperature in that size of a space, and then expand as she gets more comfortable. A lot of people probably have access to a few windows and you can make a cold frame quite easily. One of the things I really like about cold frames, we don't have one. I really wish we did. One day we probably will, something closer to the house than the greenhouse is. But greenhouses, especially when you've got real big ones, they're hard to heat if you don't have like a propane system. But when you've got something smaller like a cold frame that you're maybe starting your frost tender seedlings in, you can add hot water to like a milk jug and stick it in the corner of the cold frame and close it up. And because the cold frame is a lot closer to the plants and a lot closer to the ground than like a real tall greenhouse would be, the warm temperature is able to stay a lot more closely condensed near the plants, and the plants can actually benefit from it. When our greenhouse is pretty big and the heat just dissipates quite quickly, especially when it's empty.
Instead of mowing so much, why don't you tie some goats to a post for a few hours?
That's a great practice in theory, and that would be so much better if I had trees that I could tie a goat to. One of our big issues here is we have a very severe lack of shade and really intense summer heats. So when the grass is growing really prolifically to where I really could benefit from just moving some goats around, whether they be tied to a tree or within like an electric netting fence, my main issue is not having a way to shade them. They're gonna boil out there in the heat. They need to get away. They need to have a way to get out of the heat. And I could build something. I know Justin Rhodes has some things that he moves his sheep around in. Justin Rhodes lives in North Carolina, and he lives kind of in a sheltered and protected part of the mountains up there. The winds here are going to take anything away, and the winds on an average summer day, they can be 25-mile-an-hour winds, and that's decently intense when shelters that are light enough to move around every day will blow around. So it's just more work to me than it's worth. It doesn't save me really any time. In theory, it could save me on feed costs, but then that's why we're building our really big pasture that we're building really, really soon.
Do you think a farm should be a family affair?
We've got younger kids, and so it's a little bit harder. I've had the kids help in the past, and as a consequence, our meat rabbits didn't grow as fast as I would like because I don't know that the girls fed them really as well as they should have. However, I think it's important not to force the lifestyle that you want on anyone else, because I would hate for any of our kids especially to build any kind of resentment for farming because they were made to do something they really did not want to do. So most of the kids really like to help, but you might notice in past videos and future videos that my son Bentley he likes the animals and stuff, and he likes to help a little bit, but I could not ever picture him like mucking out a stall or like doing any of the really hard stuff and enjoying it.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet, anyway. But so it's not like we'll never ask him to do things like that. It's great for there to be, two people doing it if that's kind of their common goal. But I think with kids, they kind of didn't really ask for it, and that can be sort of a tough situation that might be kind of just dependent on each family's dynamic.
Yeah, I think there could be a balance taking everyone's talents and preferences into consideration.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, there has been. The girls really like to get the chicken eggs. A lot of times they forget to get the quail eggs, probably because it's a hike from here. I have had them feeding rabbits. I have had them feeding the dogs. Kind of just little things that add up for me. So if I don't have to think about the rabbits, I don't have to think about feeding the cats or the dogs, it really does free up like 30 minutes of my day, which is pretty valuable.
Which kind of leads us right into question number 4. Do you ever experience burnout?
That's also a yes and a no. Like, of course. I think anybody, whether they have a farm or not, they just have a regular life. I think everybody gets burned out of anything that they do. It's just a matter of how you handle it. I have places here that I could scale back from should I feel like, okay, this is a little bit too much right now. I need to just take a break. I don't experience this on a daily basis at all. And you'll probably see it this summer. The first thing to go will be weeding the garden. I'll be like, nope, I don't have the headspace for this. I don't feel like sweating for this. And it will probably be closer to where I've harvested all I need to. Tomatoes are coming out of my ears and like I've kind of given up. You'll see it, I'm sure, but it doesn't mean that anything is wrong. I think it's kind of normal to have these like fluctuations of a lot of energy and motivation, and when you're just kind of received all you can out of it, just sort of taking steps back. And that's also a good point to ask for help, because I'm sure even if there's certain family members didn't want to do something before, when they notice that it's really sapping energy from you, asking for help really could help alleviate some of that burnout. I will say too, I know this is from my friend Letty. My friend Letty takes exceptional care of her farm. She does a lot more on a daily basis with a lot less than I do. Letty likes to muck out her barn every day. Letty will hand wash all the bowls, all the water, all the food bowls, everything. I know my friend JC over at Steadfast Trail Farm talked about dusting her barn. That is not something that I do. That is excellent. That is above and beyond. But I don't do that kind of thing. If I were, I would burn out. I probably would. I've got kind of too much going on to be that thorough. I don't think there's anything wrong with being that thorough. Sometimes that's how people function. They can't do it if it's not that way, and that's fine. So if I'm doing like 10 things and you feel like, wow, I can never fit that in my day because I want to do them to their fullest and to the best of my ability, that's fine. But around in my farm, things do stay a little bit dusty because there is a lot going on, and there's always dishes in the sink, always. Yeah. Especially when you have dairy animals and bottle babies, just never ends. So
did we know before we got married that we were going to live this lifestyle?
No. We didn't know before we got married that you'd be entering the military.
Nope.
Like, I don't know, marriage is a long time if you have the fortunate ability to live that long. And I think there are a lot of things that people don't realize. There are a lot of ways that their life is going to change throughout their marriage. No, we had no idea that this was going to happen. It wasn't like we got married and this was some sort of distant dream that we talked about.
Now, I have always sort of fantasized about being able to live off the land, be self-sustaining, I guess a little bit off-grid type of lifestyle, but it's not something that I ever thought would come to fruition, that I would see in reality. In my mind, it was always one of those, if I ever played the lottery and then won the lottery big, I would move out to the middle of nowhere and live by myself, whatever, off the grid. But no, it's not something I ever actually thought would happen.
Live by yourself? I'm not invited.
You know what I mean. Edit it to make it sound good.
No! That's actually not something that I knew that you dreamed of.
Yeah. It's because of my grandfather's massive property out in Arkansas.
How many acres was that?
200? 180, I think.
Yeah, almost 200.
So, yeah,
at the top of a mountain.
As a little kid, it was an infinite amount of acres. It was forever and ever on the top of a mountain.
And I've had a lot of really good memories growing up where I grew up. I grew up in a small town in Maine, and we had farmers that lived across the street that let us play on their farm. Now, they didn't farm a whole ton of things when we lived there. They were getting up in age at that time. They used to have, I think, sheep and hogs. But when I lived across the street from them, they only had chickens and a whole bunch of berries. But we used to be able to go over there and play with the chickens all day, pick all the raspberries we wanted, and I have some really great memories from that. So I think the fondness was in both of our hearts, but it was just never this, not necessarily a common goal that we had when we got married. But I'm glad we're here, and I hope we stay here.
What advice would you give someone who doesn't have a good support system when it comes to wanting to prepare for challenging times? What signs do you think people need to watch for so you can be sure you and your hard work won't be taken advantage of?
I don't know what I would do without a good support system. I don't know. My gut instinct is to just say, doesn't matter what they think. Like, to a degree, I guess it depends if it's your spouse or whatever. Do what you do, and as long as it doesn't negatively impact others, then it's none of their business. Yep. To a point.
No, I was just going to say find a good support system, unless, of course, we're talking about the spouse, then it's...
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. But to the second point, what signs do you think people need to watch out for so you can be sure that your hard work won't be taken advantage of? If somebody is only having their hand out for what you're able to accomplish and do, and they're not contributing in any kind of way, I wouldn't be providing anything for that person if I could help it. Again, it's really hard when it's your family, but I think it's even more hard when it's your family taking advantage of something that you have worked really hard into putting forward and getting ready for, and your blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, and it's not really appreciated. That's super tough, but if they're not willing to put in even a little bit of work to make that thing come to fruition, whether it's growing chickens or processing jam or whatever, like if they don't even want to join you and learn, I don't know that I would be investing in that person. Arm's length. That kind of a person would be arm's length to me. I'm pretty picky about who I keep in my circle for similar reasons.
What's your favorite edible plant to grow and your favorite non-edible plant?
I didn't even think about my answer to this one before we sat down. Favorite edible plant. So I think about one that I couldn't really live without. It would be greens because we use them so much. They're so versatile. If it's microgreens or sprouts or a really small like greens garden. Right now in my greens bed, it's not big. It's like 2.5 feet by 4 feet. I have lettuces, kales, chard, and spinach, and a lot can be done with all of those things. So that's probably one of my favorites. And greens have a relatively long season, and when it's a hot season, there are greens for the hot seasons like chard, and then there's, I think it's amaranth. That might be a flower, but there's another one that's a hot green. I'll put it down here in the words below. And then over the winter, you've got lots and lots of cool weather variety greens. So quite versatile, something you don't necessarily have to be without at any time during the year. So that's my favorite edible plant family.
First thing that came to mind was Kajari melon. So
No, because that was kind of asked in like, I think it was our first Q&A. Was it our favorite edible plant? Was that the question was? I think it was worded differently.
It was worded differently, but I don't remember how.
But yeah, the melons. We were just talking about it the other day, like what melons are we going to grow? Because it's coming up on time to plant those seeds. Actually, tonight we're getting a pretty light frost. It's going to be 36 and frost might not even settle, although I don't hear any wind at all out there. So it may. But we'll be able to plant melons really soon, and Kajari's on the list.
Good.
Yeah.
And then your favorite non-edible?
Non-edible. What is that? So they're not edible to us, but our bees really love these stupid calorie pears. They're in our front yard. Really anything that the pollinators probably could take advantage of that we can't necessarily eat, I'm for it. Because then they can turn it into something edible.
Yeah. Are pigs loud? Would you keep them if they had to be close to the house, say 200 feet?
This is actually funny because this is from my friend Letty, and she just posted today her deal breaker for having goats is if the goat is loud, that's like where she draws the line. She doesn't really want to deal with loud goats. So I was going to say that pigs are not louder than goats, but if you already kind of don't like loud goats, you might not like pigs because pigs are just as loud. Sometimes they get louder, but it's fleeting.
Yeah, no, and when they squeal, it's
loud and it's scary.
Can be rough.
It might depend on the size of the pig that you have too. We keep coonies, and right now Bobo is 165 pounds and the girls are a little bit lighter. But when they're fighting over the wall spot inside their pen, like who gets to sleep against the wall, they get very, very loud. But we talked about it, and I think the pigs are about 200 feet straight line from here. And we never hear them from inside the house. However, I know that Letty lives where there's lots of trees. We live where there's no trees. So I imagine sound would be a lot more like ringing in a spot where there's a bunch of trees to be able to bounce the sound off of, where here it just dissipates. Like the sound just leaves. So it depends.
If money were no object, what would your ideal homestead look like? Location, amenities, and animals.
If we could move our neighbors with us, where would we live? Because we got really blessed with our set of neighbors. That does not happen often where people love their neighbors, but we do. And because of that, I'd be like, I don't want to go anywhere else. But if we could move them.
I would not hate living in the Smoky Mountains.
The mountains?
Yeah. There'd still be fields and stuff.
I'll never drive. I hate driving windy roads and stuff.
Ideal homestead. Well, one of the things we have here that we had talked about was having property with water on it.
Yeah, we do have water on it. It's not super ideal.
It's not ideal. And it's not, I think what I had in mind more was a creek, stream, or river running through it.
Running water is different than, I mean, it's sometimes water runs through it, but it's not a creek. A creek would be nice.
Yeah. I don't think I'd do any animals different, though.
Me either. I think a lot of people think that when you keep goats, that's just the animal that you have before a cow. And I do not want a cow. I do not want a beef cow. I do not want a dairy cow. I love my goats. I used to want a cow. But then we moved here. You stand next to a cow and you realize how big that animal is. And it could knock you into next week if it wanted to. And then there's a lot of things that when you're keeping a large animal like a cow that you can't necessarily do on your own without like the assistance of a vet, or he was in the military and he was gone a lot, that I couldn't do by myself, like assisting with births or trimming hooves and just a bunch of other things that cows really need like vet assistance with. And actually around here, there isn't a vet that does house calls anymore. There was when we first moved here, and now there isn't. For a whole bunch of reasons. I don't think I would change any of the animals. I don't necessarily want to keep sheep. I don't want to keep a fiber animal. I don't know.
Maybe a donkey, as we talked about that once upon a time.
Maybe a donkey. Really, I had said we would get a donkey. Our neighbors keep donkeys. I said I would get a donkey if coyotes ever got into with my goats. So if we ever have a loss of a goat, or the coyotes get in with the goats and injure one of the goats despite the dogs, I'm getting a donkey. So there's that. And I know you had talked about before, better huntable land.
Yeah.
So more land would be awesome. We only have 9.5 acres here. It sounds like a lot to someone who lives in the city, I'm sure, but when it's just open ground, it's kind of hard to figure out what to do with it. I wish more of it was treed.
And I will say, ideal property would be not more field than we have here.
Oh, no,
We have,
if anything.
we have probably about, I don't know, 5.5, 6 acres.
It's 6 acres, I think.
6 acres of field that we could do stuff with. But ideally, it would be, I don't know, X amount of hundreds of acres of woods.
Well,
And then,
also though, if money were no object and we could afford the things to do our own hay,
yeah.
then 6 acres of field doesn't look too bad. But we cannot.
No, yeah, if we could hay 10
can't.
acres or whatever, that would be different.
So more land, but let that land be trees.
What medications do you keep on hand for your animals?
There is nothing scarier than having a sick animal and it be like 9 p.m. or a holiday or the weekend and you have to run out to go get something and you can't. I have had a few situations where I've had a sick pig and been like in panic mode and I had the medicine here. And I learned that from Delci, who has a channel here. It's called Delci, A Life of Heritage, and I'll put the link in the description below. If you are going to get into goats, please binge watch all of those videos because she'll tell you from experience what things you're going to need to have on hand in case an emergency arises. And with animals like goats or really any kind of prey animal, they're not going to let you know that they're sick until they're really sick. And you want to be able to act as fast as possible to save them. So saying that, a basic broad spectrum antibiotic like penicillin. Penicillin is basically impossible to come by right now. So another really good one is called LA200. I have seen lots of LA200 around here, and I've heard of people using it for their turkeys, for their pigs, for their goats. And I used it recently with a friend's goat who had an infection in her uterus, and it did heal her up. So many uses for a broad spectrum antibiotic. You don't have to use an antibiotic if you don't want to, but when you need to, you're gonna wish you had it. I also keep things like my dewormers I have on hand. I like to buy those in bulk. Recently, I had to go get pink eye on Easter, and so if I didn't have the stuff to treat that, that would have been bad for her. So I have a pink eye spray. I know you can use things like colloidal silver. Wound spray like Blue Coat is really good to have on hand. But really, I bought this, I'm shaking my camera. I bought this goat binder from Delci, from A Life of Heritage, and it has really awesome medicine lists, dosage chart, and this, if you don't have it and you have goats, you're going to want this because it's going to help you know for yourself what you want to have on hand. And the whole list changes if you're going to be having births and everything. And I'll go ahead and link in the description my video that I have on my goat kidding kit, and I list all kinds of different things that I have in there that are pretty vital to have on hand when you've got births on the homestead. And if you've made it to the end, you know I like to do stuff at the end of my videos. And when we participated in the seed swap, I actually mailed 30 packages of mammoth sunflower seeds over to Celtic Roots Farm, and I only went through this much of my mammoth sunflower seed hoard here. So if you would like some of these mammoth sunflower seeds that we harvested off of our farm last season, send me an email. My email is in the description box with your address, and I'll get a packet out to you as soon as I can. I have a lot of them to go around, and so I'll be able to probably fulfill all of the requests for these that hit my inbox. I would say about 35% of the people that start the video actually finish it, so it shouldn't be too bad. Until next time.
The end.